The Earl turned his horse south and ordered general retreat, the admission of total defeat. As English resistance collapsed on the north bank, Scots began systematic looting. Every dead knight meant armor, weapons, horses for poorly equipped rebels, fortune beyond imagination for men who'd been fighting with farming tools days earlier. But they saved special attention for one corpse. Hugh de Cressingham's body, washed ashore downstream, bloated and grotesque, was dragged to Wallace. What happened next shocked even medieval sensibilities accustomed to battlefield brutality. Wallace ordered Cressingham flayed, his skin removed in strips, while soldiers watched. Medieval chroniclers struggled to justify this, suggesting it was symbolic. The treasurer who'd skinned Scotland through taxation would himself be skinned. Some of the skin was cut into pieces for sword belts distributed to Scottish commanders. Wallace allegedly had a larger piece made into a baldric, a shoulder belt for carrying his sword. The gruesome trophy was both practical, he needed a belt, and psychological, a message to other English oppressors. When word of this reached England, even hardened soldiers were horrified. Flaying was considered beyond acceptable warfare norms, a barbarity that marked Wallace as savage in English propaganda forever after. But to Scots who'd suffered years of Cressingham's cruelty, it was justice. By afternoon's end, English casualties were catastrophic. 5,000 plus dead, including over 100 knights each, representing enormous economic investment in training, equipment, and horses. Thousands of professional infantry, Wales's longbowmen, the elite of English military power, all dead or drowned in the Forth. Scottish losses were approximately 100 men total. The casualty ratio, 50-1, was so lopsided that contemporary chroniclers assumed exaggeration, but the bodies didn't lie. They carpeted the north bank, floated in the river, created literal bridges of flesh where wood had failed. Scotland had its impossible victory, but at terrible cost few recognized immediately. Andrew Moray, the tactical genius who'd made Stirling Bridge possible, had taken a spear thrust while leading his Skiltrons in the final assault. The wound seemed minor, a puncture in his side, painful but not obviously fatal. Medieval battlefield medicine, however, meant minor wounds killed regularly through infection. Moray would linger 2 months in increasing agony before dying, his brilliant mind trapped in a failing body. Scotland had won freedom, but lost perhaps its better general in the process. Surrey's retreat became rout. English garrisons across Scotland, learning of Stirling Bridge, abandoned their posts and fled south. Soldiers who'd strutted as conquerors now fled like thieves, abandoning supplies, weapons, anything that slowed them. The psychological impact exceeded the military devastation. If farmers could destroy knights, what safety existed for any occupier? Within weeks, Wallace controlled all Scotland north of the Forth. He was proclaimed Guardian of Scotland, effective military dictator in the absent King Baliol's name. A minor noble wanted for murder in May was now ruling an independent kingdom in September. The transformation was unprecedented in medieval politics. Word spread across Europe with shocking speed. Infantry defeating cavalry, peasants killing nobles, the impossible made real. Military theorists scrambled to understand how and why. The Schiltron formation was studied, analyzed, copied, adapted across the continent. Swiss pikemen would perfect similar tactics. The age of cavalry, supremacy, dominance in Charlemagne, cracked at Stirling Bridge. It would shatter completely at Crécy, Agincourt, and other battles where infantry learned to defeat mounted knights through terrain exploitation and superior tactics. But that was future. In September 1297, Scotland was free, and William Wallace was its improbable liberator. The abandoned English camp yielded treasure. Weapons for thousands, armor worth fortunes, war horses, each worth a small farm, food supplies meant to feed 12,000 men for weeks, gold and silver from Cressingham's tax wagons. In hours, Wallace's rebels gained equipment worth years of raiding. Stirling Castle, controlling the strategic bridge crossing, surrendered without siege. Its garrison recognized futility. English rule north of the Forth evaporated. The River Forth ran red for 3 days. Contemporary accounts agree on this detail. Fishermen avoided their trade for weeks. Bodies washed ashore as far as the Firth estuary, where the river met the sea. Each armored corpse reminded Scotland of their impossible victory. English prisoners, the few taken despite Wallace's no ransom order, spoke of the crossing as nightmare made real, where the river itself had turned enemy. Medieval warfare knew brutality, but Stirling Bridge's combination of drowning, entrapment, and systematic slaughter created trauma that survivors carried forever. Knights who escaped would never again view narrow bridges as tactical conveniences. They became death traps to be avoided at all costs. Edward I, campaigning in France when Surrey's report arrived, received news with disbelief, transforming to rage. The hammer of the Scots had been humiliated by outlaws. His response would be terrible 1298's Battle of Falkirk, where Edward personally commanded English forces and systematically destroyed Wallace's schiltrons through coordinated longbow fire, proving he'd learned Stirling Bridge's lessons about infantry vulnerability to archery. Wallace, captured through betrayal in 1305, suffered execution designed to erase victory's memory, hanged until nearly dead, disemboweled while conscious, castrated, beheaded, and quartered, his body parts displayed across Scotland as warning. It achieved the opposite. Wallace became eternal martyr, Stirling Bridge his monument. But beyond Scotland's immediate freedom, the battle's long-term impact transcended national borders. Infantry tactics evolved directly from Stirling Bridge's demonstration that common men with pikes could defeat armored cavalry. Swiss pikemen studied the schiltron. Flemish militias adapted its principles. English commanders learned to fear narrow crossings and respect terrain's power. The age of invincible knights ended in Scottish mud and River Forth water. Medieval warfare's paradigm shifted. Technology and armor mattered less than position, timing, and tactical intelligence. Stirling Bridge wrote the playbook for asymmetric warfare, smaller forces using terrain advantages against superior enemies, that remains relevant in modern military theory. Scotland's identity crystallized around Stirling Bridge. Here was proof that independence was possible, that David could beat Goliath, that farmers could break empires through courage and brilliant leadership. For 7 centuries, whenever Scotland faced overwhelming odds, Stirling Bridge offered historical precedent. The impossible had happened before, could happen again. Wallace gave Scotland more than tactical victory, he gave them belief in themselves as a nation worth fighting for. The Wallace Monument today towers 220 feet above Abbey Craig, marking where he watched English forces feed themselves into the killing ground. Visitors see the empty water where the bridge once stood, modern bridges upstream and down, but the original site deliberately left empty as memorial. Inside the monument sits Wallace's supposed sword, 67 inches of steel, historically inaccurate, far too large for any man, but symbolically perfect. Myth overwhelming truth, as it often does with legendary figures. The 11th of September, 1297, the day Scottish spears rewrote military doctrine, the day a bridge became battlefield, the day farmers proved that sometimes the impossible is just mathematics, patience, and courage to raise a sword when the moment comes. 2 horsemen wide. That's all it took to change history forever. Now you've witnessed one of medieval warfare's most perfect tactical ambushes, the day William Wallace transformed a narrow bridge into history's greatest killing ground and proved that geography, patience, and brilliant planning defeat technology and numbers every time. If this story of impossible victory through tactical genius fascinates you, if you want to explore more battles where underdogs use terrain and strategy to crush overwhelming forces, then subscribe to Flow of History right now. We bring you the most dramatic military turning points in human history, from medieval ambushes to ancient stratagems, from legendary commanders to common soldiers who became heroes through courage and brilliance. These aren't just historical battles, they're lessons in how David beats Goliath when brain defeats brawn. Join us exploring the moments when everything hung in balance and tactical genius made all the difference. Hit subscribe for flow of history, more incredible tales of impossible victories await, and you won't want to miss what comes next.